Scroll back to get some Benny going here. Man, I got a lot of music on this thing. No, this one. Are we streaming yet?
Benny Goodman
There we
and
go.
his music.
Evening, Martin. Hey, Dad, Eric, Susan, Timothy, and Meg. Hey, everybody. Hey, Betsy. Hey, Heather. Hey, Laura. Hey, Don. Hey, Tom. Hey, Diane and Gladys. We kind of popped up all at once there. Hey, Bob. Evening, everybody. Miss Luann. Okay. Hey, Rodney.
Benny Goodman, ladies and gentlemen, the man with the torrid clarinet and
And
even
more
more
torrid
torrid
band.
who purveys assorted rhythms, all danceable, in the urban room of the
Hey,
Congress
Kelly.
Hotel in Chicago.
Evening, everybody.
And first of all, one of Irving Berlin's greatest hits, Blue Skies.
Gladys waiting for what? I've been here on time. Hey, Megan. And hey, Georgia, Patty, and Jean. Hey, Evelyn. Hey, Vicky. No, they're back. They're both back over on the couch right now. Hey, Nancy, hey, Octavio. Let's go see them. Make sure we get your contractual appearance out of the way here, Miles. See, here's Miles, sitting on the back of the couch. Priya down below. Hey, Jordana, back from Disney World. Huh? That was good. A lot of people like to get away from Chicago winter. Not me. Hey, Linda. Hey, Kim. Hey, Leah and Casey. Hey, Carol. Hey, Heather. Hey, Kurt. Welcome, everybody. Hey, Ken. Hey, Susan. Oh, John, that's awesome. Hey, Florecita. Hey, Crit. Feel like I've seen some people I haven't seen in a while tonight. Miles has not been traded to the Rangers just yet. He's holding out for a bigger deal. Hey, Eileen and Jenna and John. Hey, Susan. Hey, Julie. Evening, Joanne. Hey, everybody. You're enjoying Benny Goodman live at the Congress Hotel. A couple miles south of the Gold Coast. Hey, Marita. This is one of my favorite tours to run. I really like this one. Hey, Patty.
Benny Goodman presents Ellen Ward singing With All My Heart.
Miles is on the back of the couch. I walked over and showed him a minute ago. He doesn't always come from when called, you know. Where'd my drink go? Well, I got a couple. I got this sherry cask bourbon from Jepson's. Also, where'd my Coke go? See, I ran into this bottle of limited edition Move Coke. It's like bowel movement. No, it tastes like toasted coconut. It's interesting. Oh yeah, no more Lightfoot. To nobody's surprise who lived here. What I keep seeing in the media though is because people were frustrated with rising crime. Well, people were frustrated that she kept licking the cops' butts and taking on the teachers. And treating people like terrorists for holding up signs. So now we got a battle of two goatees. Megan, I think I found it at, where did I find this? Jewel, I think. Oh yes, Mandalorian's back too. I gotta catch up on that. Hey, Lori. I've gotten more into coconut recently, so we need more Thai food. So yeah, I actually think this is a pretty good one. I gotta see if my computer is plugged. Let's see. Now I am plugged. Hey, Grandma Bell.
Benny Goodman goes way back and gets a lot
Evening,
of rhythm
Steve.
out of Walk, Jenny Walk. Benny Goodman and his orchestra.
Welcome along, everybody. Glad to have everybody here. It's one of my favorite tours to do. So much cool architecture, so many cool stories. But I have some interesting email exchanges about the mysterious Mr. Dinkelberg, which is just fun to say. Hey, Elaine. Kurt, that sounds nice. It'll be a good day to go to a farm. I don't know what the weather is like where you are. It was so nice out today. Hey, Nancy. Hey, Marie. Hey, Geraldine. Hey, welcome, Debbie. Always good to have some new people here. We do this every week. Typically, they're on Thursdays. We've been doing Wednesdays for a little while. There's a lecture series I don't like interfering with. So, plus we're at 10 o'clock on the Facebook page every morning. Hey, Olange. Thanks, Geraldine. Wait, did I sing this morning? I sing more days than not, I feel like. Georgina, damn right. Hey, Ashley. Good evening, Georgina. Hey, Tracy. Welcome along, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to let Benny Goodman do one more tune for us here while everybody gets logged on. Hey, Amy. Hey, Phoenix. Well, don't start any fires. Hey, Heather.
They all love those bastards when they're played by Benny Goodman. And now another one just in the same vein, Rosetta.
The guy I'm emailing with says, Mr. Dinkelberg's wife died with a lot of secrets. Given that Dinkelberg hung out with Charles Bowler Atwood, that's safe to say. I mean, I don't have any dirt on him, anything about him being involved in any debauchery, but come on, he was a 19th and early 20th century architect. 70s rock stars had nothing on these guys. Hey, Delphina. Ian and Chris, ABC. Seen a lot of names I don't recognize today. That's kind of unusual these days. But glad to have everybody here. Hey, Lynn. Mudslide sounds good. I'm kind of two-fisting it here. I got just a little bit of sherry cask Jepson's bourbon and this Move Coca-Cola that tastes like toasted coconut. Octavio, I don't know who you mean. Hey, Susan. Jupiter and Venus are kissing? Ooh. Does that mean it's the dawning of the age of Aquarius? Or... Actually, I think the astrology in that song is stuff that happens about every day. I'm all ready to start, but now Octavio's got me just hanging on the edge of my seat. Yeah, Sue, that's a blast from the past. I just got an interesting email from somebody accusing me of obscuring the facts because I changed the names of a couple of real people. Octavia, that's sad to hear. Even Debbie. All right, we're gonna let Benny Goodman finish up this tune, and then we'll get started properly. Thanks to everybody who's been joining the Patreon. Hit me up on Venmo.
Music by Benny Goodman is being presented from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. And now Benny Goodman's arrangement of The Bugle Call Rang.
All right, you heard the man, Benny Goodman, coming to you live from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. Nobody at the Congress seems to know which one was the Joseph Urban Room anymore, but that means it is time to go. So welcome along, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for going on 20 years now. I've got about a dozen Chicago history books out, including Mysterious Chicago, Smart Alex Guide to American History, Murder Maps USA. The most recent is Graceland Cemetery, Chicago Stories, Symbols, and Secrets. That came out from University of Illinois Press just a couple of months ago. Well, I guess it's about 6 months ago now. Time flies. So welcome along. I'm also a talking head on the History Channel and the Travel Channel all the time. So if you don't know already, I am, in fact, incredibly famous. And you should definitely pay attention to whatever I say. So today we are going to be talking about the Gold Coast in Chicago. It's a place with all kinds of incredible architecture and a lot of really interesting stories. It's historically it's been called the Gold Coast because it was a very wealthy neighborhood, though at various times it also, depending on the economy and the growth of culture, etc., there were times that a lot of these mansions got broken up into artist studios. So it's also at various times been a very bohemian kind of a neighborhood. And just so you know where we're talking about, here's a quick run of a map. There's the Loop, the main downtown area. Just up above, we'll go past River North and Streeterville and find ourselves on the near north side and the Gold Coast. This general area right around there. And here's the actual route we'll be taking tonight. Started out on Lakeshore Drive, moving up as far north as almost North Avenue and looping back around and getting over to Burton and eventually a little bit more into the Gold Coast area itself. So we're going to be talking about some of the architecture, we're going to be talking about some of the stories of these places, which is always, the architecture is just the start. I can tell you the architectural styles, the names, and the dates, but the real story is what went on in the building, I like to think. To start with, though, we'll start right on the edge of the Gold Coast, right here, at 1250 North Lakeshore Drive. You see this one just driving down Lakeshore. So it's one of the more visible sections of the Gold Coast in the city. right over around here. This was what is called Richardsonian Romanesque. It's a style of architecture that is similar to what you would see in like Henry Hobson Richardson, but this one is by a guy named Frank Abbott, who also designed the cold storage warehouse that is now the condo building over on the Chicago River. Now, this was built in 1890 for a rich guy by the name of Charles Hayson. His son changed his last name to Hyson, became a kind of a matinee idol, married Dorothy Dixon. So Dorothy Dixon Hyson, perhaps best known for singing Look for the Silver Lining, after being a silent film actress. Daughter of actress Dorothy
There's
Hyson.
so much I'm wanting to tell you. There's so much I'm wanting to say. There's so much.
But really, it's just kind of a rich guy's house. But there's a wilder story just down the block. Just a couple buildings down. There's another one that you kind of blink and you miss it driving down Lakeshore Drive. It's very small there. But this used to be a really well-known house in Chicago architecturally. This is one at 1258 known as Desdemona's Palace. Now, it was designed by Holabird and Roche, some of our early great architects, but to say that they're really the designers here is kind of a stretch, because it is a straight-up copy of this one called the Palazzo Contrini. I'm actually going to look at my Fasan in Venice. This is said to be Desdemona's palace. Desdemona, the character in Shakespeare's Othello. Now, this was eventually bought by a guy by the name of Edward Effensberger, and when his stuff was sold off, it's an interesting thing. You can see they called it the famously known as Desdemona's Palace. The content of the palatial home will be sold to the premises at public auction. But this is after the death of a guy by the name of Edward Leffensberger, who had bought the place in the 1920s. Now, this was a guy who operated a place called the 225 Club on East Superior back in the 20s. Now, in the 1920s, in the end of the 1930s as well, even after Prohibition ended, liquor was still flowing. I'm not sure if you're aware of who was running that kind of a business in Chicago, but I can assure you it was not the Boy Scouts. So Edward Leffensberger got involved in this, but after it was kind of operating more as a gambling joint than anything else. And with Prohibition ending, the mobsters were looking into new avenues of operation, including one of his partners, Frank the Enforcer Nitti. Now, Nitti got him involved in this theft of $500,000 worth of bonds from the mail. That the job was Leffensberger was supposed to take these stolen bonds and sell them to some of his high bidders in the club. But eventually the feds figured out what was happening and started moving in. And when that happened, he was found slain inside of the house. Now, this was whether it was a murder or a suicide, nobody was really sure. They did all kinds of tests trying to figure this out. They found him slumped over in an armchair, apparently dead of a suicide. There was a half-smoked cigarette and a half a glass of whiskey nearby. The family story was always that the mobsters had come in and said, listen, they're moving in, we can't let that happen, and we can't risk you talking or naming any names, so here's your gun, here's a cigarette, and here's a shot of whiskey. You know what to do. And if you don't, we'll do it for you, and then we'll take care of your wife, too. So the story goes that he did what they said, and we obviously have no way of knowing whether that's actually true or not. If it was just he might have taken the initiative himself when people started moving in. And that place was just pretty much walking distance from here if you had time. But from here, we are going to move right on into the coast, into the neighborhood, where there are just so many cool buildings. So here, the 1310 right there that you can see was built by Charles Palmer for his cousin Potter. Once lived in by boring old H.H. Porter. We saw a coyote at his grave on the morning mini tour yesterday. Even his own autobiography couldn't make him seem interesting. But then we've got this section right here on Astor Street. The middle was the home of John Wellborn Root, who was the partner in Burnham and Root. Now, he lived here just briefly before he died. He actually had his funeral here in this building. His sister-in-law was slash biographer was the founder of Poetry Magazine, Harriet Monroe. They published things like Carl Sandburg's famous City of Big Shoulders, which we constantly misprint as the City of Broad Shoulders these days. But one time in this place, Harriet, I believe, moved into this place, because in 1902, she hosted a reception here. This is Harriet. She hosted a reception for Mary McLean, who was a teenage author from Montana who had written a book called I Await the Devil's Coming. It's a really interesting book. It's really just kind of her diary. She talks a lot about being a genius in it. It's, you could very charitably describe it as emo by today's standards. She also talks about being queer at a time when that was a little bit more unusual. I'll read just an excerpt of this. It's a really compelling read. She says, "From women and men who dispense odors of musk, from little boys with long curls, from the kind of people who call a woman's figure her shape, kind devil, deliver me. From the soft, persistent, maddening glances of water cart drivers, kind devil, deliver me. From insipid sweet wine, from men who wear mustaches, from the sort of people that call legs limbs, kind devil, deliver me. From unripe bananas, from batless people, kind devil, deliver me. From soft old bachelors and soft old widowers, from agonizing elocutionists who recite, 'Curfew shall not ring tonight, and the lips that touch liquor shall never touch mine,' kind devil, deliver me. From people who persist in calling my good body mere vile clay. From fools who tell me what I want to do, kind devil, deliver me. From a nice young man, from tin spoons, from popular songs, kind devil, deliver me. From pleasant old ladies who tell a great many uninteresting, obvious lies. From men with watch chains draped across their middles. From some paintings of the old masters which I am unable to appreciate. From side saddles, kind devil, deliver me. From the kind of man who sings, 'Oh, promise me,' from constipated dressmakers, from people who don't wash their hair often enough, kind devil, deliver me." And her reception here was big. This was a very popular book when it came out. She eventually died in Chicago a few decades after this. There was a minor scandal. Like, why was she living in an otherwise almost entirely black neighborhood? They eventually, the story went around that, the woman she was living with was her nurse. Yeah. Her nurse. But it was almost like Beatlemania when she came to town. She was just mobbed everywhere that she went when she came here in 1902. And well, speaking of that, we'll move up 63 years east. We're going to go just down, we'll go around the block first. Over to the side of this is Bank Street, which fairly recently was torn up, revealing the old wooden paver blocks. Now, originally, for a while, a lot of the Gold Coast was made with wooden pavers. They still smelled like creosote. I helped myself to quite a few of them. As they were tearing it up to repave it, and just underneath were all of these old wooden stones. It was really cool, wooden stones. There's still a couple of blocks around Chicago that are built like that. Just a couple. They looked about like this. We'll go just down the block here. Speaking of Beatlemania, this is the Astor Hotel. Well, let's move down. We'll actually see the old version of it. I still have the wrong clip up. But just next door, really, is now the Astor Tower, originally the Astor Hotel, designed by Bertrand Goldberg, who's probably better known for Marina City here in Chicago. He is commonly quoted as saying that there are no right angles in nature, so we shouldn't have any in architecture either. But, of course, there are quite a few of them over here at the Astor Hotel. Now, there's a number of stories I could tell about the Astor, but, of course, my favorite is the time that the Beatles came here in 1966, part of their opening of their 66 World Tour. This was right after, a few months before, there had been an article in the UK, "How Does a Beatle Live?" by Maureen Cleave. And this is the one where John Lennon famously said that Christianity will fade. I'm right and I'll be proven right. We're probably more popular than Jesus now. And in the UK, the decline of Christianity had been a common dinner table conversation since about World War I, so it didn't raise any eyebrows at all in the UK when it was published. But over here, the Beatles were immediately canceled by a number of groups. They started getting death threats, especially in the South. So the Astor Hotel press conference that they held here while staying here was their chance to kind of address that. So we'll actually see some footage of the building and the crowd outside of it, followed by a bit of the press conference here. There's some silent footage here of the crowd outside, hoping to get a glimpse. I totally would have gone. Apparently they got a look.
If it had said television is more popular than Jesus, I might have got away with it. But I'm not saying that we're better or greater or comparing us with Jesus Christ as a person or God as a thing or whatever it is. You know, I just said what I said and it was wrong or was taken wrong, and now it's all this.
How do you feel about the record burnings here in the United States?
Well, I think, you know, that it's a bit silly. It seems a bit like a publicity stunt on their part, you know.
I think they handled that very well. And yes, Laura, the answer to that is obviously Paul. Paul was the one barefoot on the cover of Abbey Road. All right. So, we're going to move just across the street from there briefly. I just want to check out for a second on the other side of Goethe Street, named after Johann Wolfgang Goethe, who wrote The Sorrows of Young Werther, another early example of emo literature, are these really awesome houses that I always just love. The architects of these are apparently unknown. Preservation Chicago's Guide to the Gold Coast and their preservation stuff doesn't list an architect for these. It lists one for practically every house in this neighborhood. Condos in these places run about $500,000 each. Fairly spacious, too. Shudder to think the HOA fees. It's kind of a common thing in this vicinity. You see a lot of places that look like they're remarkably affordable, then you look at the HOA fees. All right, so right across the street from here is the Ambassador East Hotel. Now, there's a lot of stories here, but for one thing, underneath it, when they were digging out the basement for these, they ran into the old Huck tunnels. Way back in the 1850s, John Huck, the brewer, dug about a mile of old brick tunnels for aging his beer in the summertime. Last time they're known to have been seen in person is when they gave them the devil's old time with digging out the basement for this. They're presumably still under the Gold Coast someplace, but nobody has any hard data as to exactly where. But the Ambassador ended up being a rock and roll hotel, and really was until, might still be for all I know. I know as recently as 2005, Bob Dylan was staying there. Not that I hung outside and dug through his trash or anything. But as on the door, when I filmed this about 1.5 or 2 years ago, you can see there's a picture of David Bowie praying in there. There's Marilyn Monroe and the telephone in there, both of whom stayed here. There also is, of course, for my purposes, there was a coal baron, a guy by the name of Polly, James B. Polly, was murdered and killed himself inside of the place. It was kind of a murder-suicide case. They ended up deciding it was temporary insanity, as they often did in these cases of murder-suicide. In this case, they even had a whole diagram of the place. Here's Wendell Bowie, a lot of Bowies in this place, walked inside, saw a gun on the floor, Mrs. Polly sitting in the chair. It's kind of remarkable they didn't just show the crime scene. This was 1929. Newspapers were not afraid of showing crime scenes at the time. But once again, they eventually ruled temporary insanity, which happened a lot, particularly with people whose estates could afford it, or possibly just to spare anything difficult, since everybody involved there wasn't anybody left to prosecute anyway. But just around the corner from it, on the other side of the building, is the famous Pump Room. Now, the Pump Room was, in the kind of the Rat Pack era, it was a very famous nightclub. This is booth number 1, which famously had its own telephone. They still keep one set up beside it, as of last time it was open. And this was kind of a famous place. Like, every celebrity had the number of the telephone at booth 1 at the Pump Room. This is back before everybody just had a phone in their pocket, obviously. Here's Phyllis Diller talking on the booth 1 phone. You never knew who might call you while you were there. Here's, Judy Garland and little Liza Minnelli sitting at booth number 1. And there's Bogey and Bacall sitting at the booth as well. It's just a who's who of people who was in and out of the Ambassador over the years. Not to mention, at one point, Phil Collins was kicked out of the place for not having a jacket. Hence the title of his that inspired the title of his album, No Jacket Required. But once again, as I mentioned, there's also underneath that, the whole place used to be a brewery. Down underneath, there's some renderings of what it was like. The tunnels people remembered as being brick, though by then it was decades and decades later that anyone was talking about it. John Huck we sometimes see over on the Graceland Cemetery tour. Right near the current entrance is his son's mausoleum that his son is not actually in, Lewis Huck. But the thing is, about 1910, parents in the neighborhood got worried that their kids were playing cops and robbers in the tunnels. And they were the real robbers hanging around in there, so they had them all boarded off. I keep hoping somebody's going to run into a mansion at some point. Megan met Phyllis Diller. That's really cool, Megan. Very funny for her. Very funny comedian. We'll move down here from a bit. And just down the block from the Ambassador, conveniently located, is this old mansion at 1239. A little up from 1239. This is the original Playboy Mansion. Playboy got his start in Chicago. You might know next Thursday, Olivia at Room 13 is the Chicago for Chicagoans lecture series is going to be talking about Playboy's influence on Chicago. This is back, they had control of the Palmolive building with a Lindbergh beacon up on top for a while. That was the Playboy building. And this is 1950s Playboy. This is when Playboy was mostly literary fiction, jazz reviews, theater criticism, and like articles on how to buy a tape recorder for less than $500. In 1950s money. Then there's like 2 pages of PG-13 photographs. But inside, Hef had it all set it up with a grotto and a pool, kind of very similar to the mansion he eventually had in Los Angeles. In particular, down below, there was a window that looked in on the swimming pool. And you could probably imagine this was kind of a party pit for a time. Here's Shel Silverstein, best known today as a children's poet, but also wrote really naughty songs like Freakin' at the Freakers Ball. In addition to cover of the Rolling Stone, the Ballad of Lucy Jordan, One's on the Way, so many songs that this guy wrote. Boy Named Sue for Johnny Cash. He kind of lived in the basement of the Playboy Mansion for a while. And then became a children's book author. We'll also go just down the block to 1239. There's a place, I didn't have this on the initial version, but so many people wanted to add it to me. I don't think these are people who actually ever even read Hemingway. It's just kind of a landmark. Shortly after he was married, for a while, Ernest Hemingway was living here at 1239. Well, yeah, Maria, in 1993, Playboy was still paying way more for fiction than anybody else was. We'll walk down over here a bit. Oh yeah, Freakin' at the Freakers Ball. That's a good album. That's one of his solo albums. He was also writing songs for Dr. Hook at the time. But just down the block, there's this really interesting multicolored mansion. Well, townhouse. But I love it when there's interesting colors in a building, as it just doesn't really happen all that often. These are known as the Montagna Flats. They were built in 1887 by an architect named Kurt Gottig, who is not known for anything else. There's another view of it. But it was built, known as the Montagna Flats because they were built for Lucius Montagna, a shoe salesman, who apparently did very, very well for himself. Did much better selling shoes than Al Bundy did. Though, frankly, Al Bundy lived all out of proportion up in Deerfield to how his salary actually would have been at the time. We'll move down. I remember people talking about that even at the time. You hear a lot now. It's like, well, in those days, Homer Simpson could have a house like this. And no, there was always some long-winded explanation for why sitcom characters could live like they did. But just down the block over here also is 1337, a house built for Augustus Warner. Here's how it looked before they redid it. Well, this one was done by Lars Hallberg, who's one of those architects that people see his buildings in Chicago all the time, but they don't really know who he is. He's probably better known these days for the Chase Sanborn Coffee Warehouse, which is right across Wells Street from the Merchandise Mart, right on the river. This is often held up on river architecture tours as like a prime example of the Chicago School of Architecture. You can even see it even says the Chicago School right on it. It's like the Chicago School of Psychology that's in there. It just happens to be that style of architecture as well. But they almost never mention the name of the architect when they go by it. It was Lars Hallberg. I'll move up a bit to one that I just adore. Now, this is such a cool place with like its griffin built in. 1401 North Dearborn. And incidentally, this right here at Dearborn and Schiller would have been the exact entrance to the old city cemetery that was in Lincoln Park. It extended a little bit south of where the park would be today. But this was a place built for a guy by the name of an architect named Asa Lyon, who also is not much known for much else either, though he did build a lot of stuff in Evanston. Maybe we can see that on some upcoming morning mini tours. Built for a guy by the name of Luther McConnell, who was the credit manager at Marshall Field. Hull House actually started with meetings in this building. It was here that the committees first met. We'll see another view of it from the side. close up on that griffin because that's just so cool looking. Now, as of the time I filmed this, it was owned by Richard Dreyhaus, but he died, I believe, like the day I first did this tour. So this is kind of bad luck having me do a tour about your house. We'll just kind of keep that in mind. Here it is from the side. And up here, over the door on the Schiller Avenue side, there is this stained glass of Schiller, the poet. It's based on this painting. I'm not sure how long it's actually been there. I don't think it's an original touch. In any case, you can't see it when it served as Chez Louis, the place where Ferris Bueller sneaks in to have a fancy lunch by claiming to be Abe Froman, the Sausage King of Chicago. And here's Richard who restored the place. A lot of times you see a building like this around the Gold Coast. If there's like artificial kerosene lights outside, pretty good chance he was involved. Let's move over just around a little ways, up to 1528 Dearborn, a little bit further up the block. And welcome to all the newcomers as well. There is also a group here called on Facebook called Mysterious Chicago Regulars and Miles Fan Club. Miles is the cat. You'll see him at the end, I'm sure. But here's an interesting case. On a lot of these things, it's naturally, we love to talk about suffragists, people who fought for women's rights to votes. I do like to throw in the occasional villain here as well. Up at 1528, this was the home of Carolyn Corbin, who famously campaigned against votes for women. Mrs. Corbin on voting, she had just the nastiest quotes about this. One of them, "The American people will never have any sympathy with a doctrine that leads to promiscuous prostitution as a substitute for the family, and that would abolish the Christian home and set up a code of social morals by the side of which Mormon polygamy and Mohammedan harem are commendable and altogether virtuous. Should such a calamity ever occur as the success of socialism, the last of its confiscations will be the home, and after that, chaos!" Trouble with a capital T and that rhymes with a V, and that stands for votes for women, I guess. I like to throw in the occasional villain on these things. You can just imagine this woman on cable television nowadays, or in Congress. We'll move around the block a little bit closer to the water. Now, for one thing, there is kind of an artificial wooden alley here. It's become kind of a tourist attraction, even though it's not really original. Outside of the Cardinals mansion here at the from 1885 by James Willett, home of 8 different archbishops of Chicago who have lived here, though the current one didn't move in. He lived at Holy Family, kind of in keeping with more modern trends. 19 chimneys on this place. And then over alongside of it is a wooden alley. And this one has stayed wooden, though it was totally restored back in 2011 with black locust wood. Originally, it would have been creosote and cedar. We had about 50 miles of streets like this at one time. Couple of others, I keep hearing, there's a couple of other alleys that still have them. We're going to head back on to Lakeshore Drive for a second. We've got this building that is currently the Museum of Surgical Sciences. Originally built for a broker named F.D. Contis. Now, this is a mansion that is based on this one, Le Petit Trianon, which is like Marie Antoinette's summer home or something. But he ended up marrying a woman by the name of Eleanor Robinson, a match company heiress. Originally, F.D. Contis had been engaged to her sister, but then she came home from school and stole her sister's fiancé. She had quite a lot of adventures, like she went out hunting bears in 1921. Then in 1925, she got a divorce. There was kind of a rule at the time, you had to have been deserted for 2 years. So F.D. Contis, when they wanted a divorce, he just politely moved around the block for a couple of years until she was able to get it. Now, inside of this place now, it's now the Museum of Surgical Sciences, where they have things like trepaned skulls. Trepanning was a process where they would drill a hole into your skull for fun and profit. They've also got a death mask of Napoleon. This was like a gold mine. I was doing this whole series of portraits of the Imperial Commander action figure from the old Empire Strikes Back line. He's got this hangdog expression that makes every portrait of him look like a work of art. Here he is cruising down the galaxy looking for the heart of Saturday night. Here he is among some of the statues of eminent scientists. Here he is mixing in with a painting of an anatomy demonstration. You find out in this museum that the tools the ancient Romans used to remove foreign particles from their butts are very similar to the ones that we use today. We'll move around from here over to Burton. Just down the block onto Burton Street. We'll turn to the side and see 40 East Burton. A house built for the lawyer John Shortall. Later, it was the home of the Midwest headquarters of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese. Shortall was the president of the Humane Society. Richard Schmidt, the architect, also designed things like the Schoenhofen Pyramid and a couple of other mansions in the general vicinity. His father, Ernst Schmidt, was the most respected radical anarchist in town. We briefly saw his monument yesterday. His father ran for mayor under the socialist ticket a couple of times. Much, I'm sure, to, I don't know, I'd have to check the timeline, whether Carolyn Corbin was alive at the time, much to her chagrin, I'm sure. Move just down the block from that. This is the Patterson Mansion, McCormick Patterson Mansion. The sign here, so the sign outside says that it was built for Sissy Patterson. It was really, Sissy was like 9 when this was built, but it was designed by the architect Stanford White, so designing stuff for 9-year-old girls is frankly keeping within his character. Would have been really built for her mother, though she did grow up in the house. She eventually became a newspaper editor, a star of many gossip columns herself. Now, there's been biographies of her recently. They mostly focus on her wild and crazy love life, which is frankly more polite than focusing on her politics, which were just awful. But there was also in the 1960s and the 1950s, the building had stopped being an old robber baron mansion, and it instead had become a school. It was called the Bateman School. What I always hear from people who went there, it was a school for the absolute worst kids in the city. It's where you went when you got expelled from everywhere else. My friend Daniel Pinkwater went there for a while. He specifically remembered one of his teachers, Virginia McManus, was a teacher by day and a call girl by night. This came out in the press at the time. It was also a time when the place caught fire. 2 girls admit that they had started it. There was a pretty good story as to why they did it. I can't remember exactly. You can also see a picture of how it looked at the time. But the general sense I get from people who went to school there is that they were slowly destroying the place. The one thing is there was a room called the Mirror Room where kids remember doing Bloody Mary, which is the earliest I have seen of a Bloody Mary ritual. That's the thing where you say Bloody Mary in the mirror until she shows up. In most versions, most versions of the legend you say it 3 times. At my school, it was 99 because we had values in those days. Now, the place was broken into condos a while back. Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins owned one. Here's a quick video about the real estate so we can see the inside. All right. I always thought that was cool. There's a terrific book that Pinkwater wrote called The Education of Robert Nifkin. They changed the name of the school, but it's clearly what he's talking about in it. Gives you a very good feeling of what it was like to be inside of this school that was mostly for the worst kids in town. Now and then after I've done this tour, people will be like, hey, my husband went to that school. After getting expelled from 2 other schools from things he won't talk about. But move up just briefly. Up here at 1431 is a townhouse by Hullibert and Roche. This is a couple of guys who came out of William LeBaron Jennings' office and helped really pioneer the Chicago School of Architecture in the early 20th century. But a lot of these architects, people who built things like the Marquette Building, like these guys, also were known to build just houses all over the place, all over Chicago and in Evanston. Well, also, just around the block from here, just across the street, is something you don't see very often, which is an Art Deco townhouse. We talked about Root earlier. Root's son and Holabir's son went on to form Holabird and Root, who were like the rock stars of Art Deco Chicago, doing things like the Board of Trade building, the Palmolive building. Over here on the right, it's very unusual to see an Art Deco style townhouse with that same streamlined verticality and simple geometric art that we normally see. You know, it's almost curved enough that we could almost call this streamlined moderne, the architecture that grew out of Art Deco. Let's move down just a little ways. To an empty space. I think overall, they've done a very good job maintaining a lot of historical stuff in the Gold Coast. You still walk around seeing like the history just all around you. But of course, we didn't maintain all of the mansions. There used to be one for Louise de Koven Bowen, one of the early Hull House ladies, who eventually was encouraged to run for mayor in like the 1930s. She would have been our first woman mayor had she won by decades. Louise de Koven Bowen, social reformer, as a young girl, stole all of Eli B. Williams' gooseberries. The resulting diarrhea talked her out of stealing ever again. Grew up to be a major social reformer. Now, she recalls in her autobiography, she recalls going to Lincoln Park when it was brand new. Her father was all excited, we've got to go see this new park. But she went right when they were in the process of transforming it from a cemetery into a park. And she said there were still bits of broken coffins lying around. There were bits of bones just lying around on the ground. And she said to herself, I will never come to this park. But then she ended up building her mansion right on the old grounds of it. And she did mention that they found bodies when they were digging out the basement. The housekeepers would not go to the basement because they were absolutely sure that it was haunted. I wish we could still have this one around. That would be a really good addition to ghost tours. Getting buses around this vicinity can be a little bit of a trick, but I've done it before. We'll also go just down the block here. Just to really briefly check out some architecture. This is another by Lars Hallberg, who again is best known for the Chase Sanborn Coffee Warehouse today. And just up the block from that is one of my absolute favorites, at 1428 State. This cream-colored one with all of the green touches and what looks like a sea serpent riding around at the top of it. Such a cool place. Built in 1886, the architect Mr. Hauser for a beer baron named George Weiss. You better wise up, George Weiss. But in 1925, it was the home of a guy by the name of Dr. Hazlitt. I'll show another view of it here. Love all these touches. But in 1925, one of the big news stories of the year was a guy by the name of Floyd Collins got trapped underneath a rock at a cave-in. And this became a really big news story. People gathered around, people started setting up rides, setting up hamburger stands. This became the basis of the movie Ace in the Hole, directed by Billy Wilder. They just screened it at the Music Box recently. Also, one of the inspirations, along with the baby in the well story that informed that episode of The Simpsons where Bart pretends he fell down a well and then does. Here's some actual newsreel footage of it. I very rarely get into stuff. I mostly do older stuff, so it's kind of unusual for me to be able to find footage of things. In 1925, they got a lot of footage of this. So he was trapped underneath a rock and couldn't get out, and this became a major news story. Meanwhile, back here in Chicago, was Anita McCormick Blaine, one of the daughters of Cyrus McCormick. Now, you all know that I can't stand Cyrus McCormick. The dude ran his newspaper as a mouthpiece for frothing at the mouth white supremacy. But as often happened with guys like that, their kids grew up to be politically very, very different. Anita McCormick Blaine was generally regarded as kind of a weirdo by her neighbors, but was, looking back on her own politics, she has a lot less to be ashamed of anyway. She was really fairly progressive. But she personally paid Dr. Hazlitt, who lived here, to go down to that cave and try to amputate the leg. So this is kind of buying him into one of the biggest news stories of the day down in Kentucky. But it was an unsuccessful task. He was eventually found dead after 17 days. Now, here's an interesting thing with this particular Daily Tribune headline. We got the big one about Collins, but then just kind of a side story on the side. Stokes lawyer defends quiz on wife's past. This ties into a whole other great Chicago mystery. There's a guy by the name of W.E.D. Stokes who built the Ansonia Hotel in New York. Became convinced that his wife had previously been what he called an inmate, one of the butterflies at the Everleigh Club. This led to a huge scandalous divorce. He went to the old Everleigh Club, and the woman who was there at the time pointed to a vase and said, "That vase could tell you who killed Marshall Field Jr." Or at least that was Stokes' version of the story. The dude was just wild. But that's New York. It's a whole other thing from here. But for a while, they actually made Collins' coffin into a tourist trap. Now, what's even better is it had a glass top. I won't linger on that shot too long, even on this group. But once again, there is some real estate footage from the inside of this place. So here's how it looks on the inside. Enjoy the pleasant music. Now, Arthur Meeker Jr. said that Anita McCormick Blaine was, to put it very gently, not like most other people. He thought she was a total nut. Nice modern kitchen there. I'd make some different choices with the wallpaper. A lot of walnut, but not like a 1970s rec room with wood paneling. You sure see a lot of those. I got this idea. We're going to do a series where we map out a tunnel you could take from Lincolnwood to the lake, going through just one rec room, wood-paneled rec room after another. We'll tunnel them all together and make the ultimate rec room. You'd think the place would have an elevator just based on the music they're playing here. So we do need a Mysterious Chicago clubhouse and a place to host the upcoming Mysterious Chicago dinner, so if anybody wants to kick in down below so we can buy this place. Right, it's about 10 more seconds. Let's keep showing it. Look at these places. I'd make a few different choices here and there. Maybe stain the wood darker, but that might be a bad idea. I have to talk to people about that. But all right, ladies and gentlemen, so that concludes one of my favorite tours, Strange Tales of Chicago's Gold Coast. Sunday morning, we will be doing the virtual boat tour, talking about a lot of the same architects that we have covered today, not to mention the one we've been covering on the morning mini tours, Frederick P. Dinkelman. who is not only a guy with one of the best names ever, it's really fun to say the mysteries of Dinkelman, but really, really an underappreciated architect. He did a really prominent building on the river. He did the Flatiron Building in New York while working for Daniel Burnham. So that will be Sunday morning at 10 o'clock right back here. Once again, coming soon are Mysterious Chicago dinners tomorrow night on the Patty Vasquez Facebook page. So we will be doing Whiskey and a Cookie at 7 p.m. Again, we have moved that from 6:30 to 7 recently because it's much easier for other people to get there, and I don't have to hold down the fort all by myself for the first half hour anymore. And again, we do morning mini tours every single day at 10 o'clock. Those ones are only on Facebook. When I'm out in the field, I can't really broadcast to multiple sites at once. But thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. With that, I will put the Benny Goodman back on, put up that link again, and we'll just hang out like we always do. Thanks for joining me, everybody. Thank you, Betsy. Today is Wednesday. Oh yeah, Friday is Whiskey and a Cookie. I'm so used to saying that's tomorrow. Normally we do these on Thursday nights. We've been doing Wednesdays for a month or so because there's a lecture series on Thursdays that I don't want to interfere with. Thank you, Evangelina. Thank you, Ellen. Thanks, Heather. It's completely messed up my ability to know what day it is on any given day. Gene, enjoy the show. Thanks, Tracy, on YouTube. Do I know any cool places in Denver? Not a one. Gene, you called Gerda Gothy? Uncultured swine in your neighborhood. Have you never read Faust? Should the crust of earth not gape and swallow up this rebel, I'll look for the hell for my escape and dive down to the devil. From this revel, kind the devil deliver me. Laura, yes, there is a Chicago for Chicagoans tomorrow. That'll be at 7 o'clock on the Chicago for Chicagoans page. Tomorrow is about department stores. Next week, Olivia is doing a talk about Playboy in Chicago. I probably should have done this one next week. Kathleen, we're still working out all the details for the dinners. It'll kind of be like an in-person version of the Time Travel Pub Calls. Yeah, Elaine, I'm drinking this Move Coke, which tastes like toasted coconuts. It's pretty delicious. I don't know a thing to do in Denver when you're alive, but I know there's a Warren Zevon song about things to do in Denver when you're dead, which I believe became a movie title later. Yeah, I'm kind of two-fisting it between the Move Coke and this sherry cask bourbon.
And that would put rhythm in the feet of a wooden Indian. That was the bugle call rag.
Bob, no, I have not yet moved.
The popular tune, Thanks a Million.
Nobody's moving. They're just sitting there mooing. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Move like as in that sounds like a laxative brand or a laxative tea or something. Octavio, I saw that one, but only in like a $7 12-pack. I don't want to risk it. What if it's bad? Famous Cat Chronicle, that was absolutely a Tom Waits reference. Once again, this is Benny Goodman live at the Congress Hotel, 1936. Thanks, Evelyn. Kristen, logically, Shanky's Whip would be down the block by Vic Shaw's where Lil the Whipper worked. Down the street, not down the block. I think it was the other block across. Bob, I got some Glenn Miller, but I don't know if I tried to play stuff that was live in Chicago for these, and also hopefully like radio broadcasts that don't get me dinged on copyright stuff.
Down Harlem Way, they're all trucking, and here's Helen Ward to tell you all about her. Trucking.
Dana, sorry. I was going to go back to Thursday, but there was a couple of requests for other lectures that are coming up. So in 2 weeks, we will go back to Thursday. Karen, thank you. This is one of my favorites as well. Evelyn, I get it. The dinners we might be able to like do a virtual broadcast on as well, but obviously you won't get to taste the food. Kathy, Chicago for Chicagoans is always Thursdays. Ooh, Kindergarten with the Shed. Mostly you're just going to be trying to find the clownfish. Everybody's going to want to see the Nemos. I got my first school group itinerary for the year in New York. They are scheduled to see 3 Broadway shows, none of which I have seen before. Martin, good question. Famous Cat Chronicle. I don't think I know Tommy. I might. We'll probably run into each other at some point. You run that whole Chicago history feed? I don't know the guy's name who runs that. You notice at the Shed Aquarium, if you go to the cafeteria, they do not serve any fish.
On the Alamo.
Mm-hmm. 6 to 10 inches of snow. Well, all right. It was always weird if I took a school group first to the Shed and then to Bubblegum Shrimps. Like, oh, hope you guys enjoy the fish. Now let's go eat some. Somebody pointed out they don't have dinosaurs at the Field Museum, but they do have chickens. So they kind of have dinosaurs. They have evolved dinosaurs. 6 to 10 inches, I had not heard that. Given that it was in the 50s today, it's hard to imagine the snow really sticking. Yes, Chris, of snow. This isn't the After Hours tour. I've just been making references to putting things in butts. Oh yeah, Kat, I worked at the Bubba Gump one summer about 20 years ago. It is gone now. Do cemeteries keep records on if when gravestones are replaced? Sometimes. It's kind of hard to tell. Sometimes they'll have like a record of when one was first installed, but whether to replace something or not necessarily. That's a Graceland anyway. Others are less forthcoming with their records to me.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and we stay right in the urban room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago and dance some more to Benny Goodman and his orchestra and hear Helen Ward sing Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Let me go find Miles. You know where he has been? Let's go bring Miles over. He'll do the song with us. Come on, Miles. Time for your program. Yeah. Magnificent Miles. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch your troubles by the toe. If it hollers, let it go, let it fly away. It's the saying, high and low. Hear it everywhere you go, any time of day. Healing brings it, wisely sings it, wise men wings it, even Mr. Crosby sings it. Hey, Debbie. Catch your troubles by the toe. If it hollers, let it go, let it fly away. Helen Ward on the vocals with Benny Goodman. Miles, of course, everybody knows is the real star of the show around here. And anytime I'm on the computer, he will not, over around here, he will not leave me alone. I can't really work at my desk. Because if he's in the room, he's going to want to come be with me. He doesn't realize we're not live streaming all the time. Good night, Kristen. No, Lynn, I can't do anybody's moves. I can't do anybody's dance moves. I've come to realize lately it's almost like, people on the spectrum who can't understand metaphors or can't process metaphors. I'm like that with like dance instructions and yoga instructions. People tell me to soften my knees or extend my spine. That just does not compute with me. None of it my brain just does not process that into actual instructions. Kathleen, yes, should you need a Miles bumper sticker or something like of that nature, cafepress.com/MysteriousChicago for all your Mysterious Chicago needs. You can see Miles right down there on the logo. You also get your Johann Hawk t-shirts. So then I'm trying to work into proposals for the Hawk Whistle. I know people are already wearing t-shirts of this guy. We're gonna make him more famous. I know he's not yet. Yeah, we gotta get some shawls around here. There are hoodies available. I'm still rocking your hoodie, chewing on the strings. Kathy, not yet. I'm just, I'm kind of submitting it to a couple of publishers just on my own. My last couple of books, the publishers came to me instead of my agent, so. But, let's show you the numbers here, but look! The check for the H.H. Holmes book royalties has finally arrived from last July. This officially clears up, I believe, all of the missing royalty payments, or at least we've made contact. They're not all in my hand, but there were like 3-4 different books that I wasn't getting paid for properly. Publishing is awful. Good jump, Miles. It's not exactly big bucks, but it's, you know, it's not an amount that I would sneeze at. Good night, Marita.
And here's a short encore portion of Benny Goodman's forthright invitation at the beginning of his program. Let's dance.
Good night, Kathy in Arkansas. We'll let Benny finish on up. Let's dance. Purveying assorted rhythms, all danceable. It's weird how many of these places don't do auto deposit. It's still kind of old school in publishing. Of course, last time I needed to look for an agent, it was still like people wanted stuff hard copy in the mail. Which even at the time I thought was absurd.
We have been presenting the music of Benny Goodman and his orchestra from
Night, Leah. Night, Amy.
Congress Hotel on
Well, I'll be
Michigan
popping off
Avenue
here in a second, I'm sure.
This is the National Broadcasting Company.
All right, thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. I will see you all tomorrow morning with another morning mini tour. And until then, of course, ladies and gentlemen, stay safe and stay strong. And once again, remember that on Sunday morning, it's a virtual architectural boat tour. And until then, I will see you all soon. Stay safe and stay strong and stay warm and stay dry. And if you can, of course, ladies and gentlemen, you gotta stay spooky. Have a great night.